and call 911.
The question everybody wants answered is why? Why these 4 kids?
Despite a gag order, this documentary is dropping on Amazon on July 11th, exactly a month before the trial starts in August. It's good timing, obviously, for the documentary makers, but clearly not very good timing for those trying to insulate the trial from the public so that a fair trial can be held. As cases go, there is no doubt this is one of the most high profile out there thanks to its grisly shock value. This case has young, beautiful victims and a bloody, terrifying, shocking crime scene. But I basically did a 180 when I visited Moscow and the funhouse. It was still standing at the time. And how shall I say it? I felt the pain of the community. I really did. I've gone to crime scenes before, and it's something I feel everywhere. In Boulder, in Massapequa, in Praia da Luz, Portugal. But in Moscow, it was different. And I made a personal decision, despite the fact that my channel explicitly covers high-profile cases, and in spite of the fact that this case has been and still is very high-profile, I decided not to cover it really from then on. I decided to respect the legal process, but also to allow Moscow to heal, to not add fuel to fire, to try to help the young people at the center of this move on and enjoy a period of their lives that's about life and living, not blood, death, and dying. And if I could play even a small part in that, I wanted to. You might say, well, how is my covering this now respecting the process? Well, I'm highlighting the fact that in true crime, we all have a responsibility, individually and collectively, whether we like it or not. Creators do, journalists do, family members do, you, the audience, do as well. Meanwhile, another documentary just dropped hours ago, this one.
When I arrived on the ground in Moscow, I remember right away there was a lot of confusion.
Can you tell us what you were looking for?
The cops said the murders at King Road occurred sometime after 4 a.m.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
In this analysis, we're going to talk about the question of why, and also address this question, why these 4 victims? But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, if you're new to the channel, or even if you're a regular, I want to recommend the new documentary on Netflix, Titan, the Ocean Gate submersible disaster. It really is probably one of the best documentaries I think I've ever seen on Netflix. I'll also be examining that documentary in more detail over the course of the next couple of days, so look out for that. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, meaningful, important, please hit the thanks button and let's get started.
He and Kaylee had been dating for their entire tenure at the University of Idaho, and they had recently broken up.
I must say, it's kind of funny seeing Kathleen Hale featured in the second documentary. Do you remember her? She wrote about this case for Vanity Fair, and I did a live interview too, I think, with her. I still remember asking her why she was in Moscow, and I suspected it could have been for a documentary, and I remember being quite coy about it at the time. So it's interesting seeing all the characters attracted to this story, like bees to the honeypot or shark smelling blood, take your pick.
From the moment that this story broke, I knew that this was going to be one of the biggest crime stories that I'd ever covered.
And so obviously, if this is one of the biggest stories, you should cover it, right? You're a storyteller, this is a big story, so obviously you'd cover it. But the reality is, these aren't stories, these are real people and real lives. The blood on the floor is real, the house is real, the people who live beside the scar that remains of that house, which is not actually there anymore, they are real as well. And that reality persists even when the storytellers move on to the next big story. I want to circle back to this whole idea of the storytellers But let's deal with motive, this question of why. And I hate to say it because I think it suggests that I sympathize with the prime suspect here when I really don't. I feel I do understand his motive, but that doesn't mean I agree with it.
Far from it.
Again, I hate to say it, but what I think the prime suspect was experiencing was the kind of cold heartlessness we are seeing right here in the people covering the story. Not all, but many, mindlessly covering a story.
Everything about this case was thought-provoking and eye-catching.
Was it? But what about the feelings of the people still in the midst of it? What about the trial? What about justice? Or is everyone just out to get their pound of flesh? Because it feels that way. And so, anyway, let me deal with it. I think the answer to why is answered in the first few seconds of the trailer. Listen carefully.
These kids were just having the best time of their lives.
But there was a kid who wasn't having the best time of his life. He wanted to, but for whatever reason, he couldn't join in, couldn't get in the door, couldn't crack the nod. And of course, nobody cared. Everyone was having the time of their lives and, too much to care. Kind of like folks in true crime sometimes are having the time of their lives in a gratuitous sense to care as well. I mean, to really care.
Nobody could have imagined what was about to happen.
Well, I do think this was a premeditated crime. And so I think there was somebody who was imagining exactly what was going to happen. And what's more, he was going to enjoy himself when he was doing this. And that is the sign of a sadist, right? But before you go blaming the prime suspect as being the only person who's interested in sadism, there are a lot of people who take a sadistic interest in this case. They like the fact that there's shock value because they know there are people out there that enjoy it. And this makes me angry. I've seen it in many other cases, especially the Kylie Rodney case, but increasingly in every case, and it makes me angry, this mercenary, opportunistic, essentially predatory approach to the human condition. But let's deal with another aspect of this, the idea that the victims were targeted. Were they? Were all of them targeted? What do you think?
The attack was targeted with a, quote, edged weapon.
So what motivated the killer not just to kill, but to target those he targeted? It was because of their careless hedonism. He felt left out, and I think the reason he targeted Maddie, Kaylee, Zan, and Ethan wasn't so much to target anyone specifically, but to target those in that house. That transparent fishbowl-like party house where it was so clear from the outside. You could see it, you could see what was going on inside, you could hear what was going on inside, and you could even feel, in a sense, how much fun was going on inside while he was stuck on the outside.
We were a big group of friends. Why would you target those four?
Why would you target those who were targeted? Well, I do think the Idaho 4 killer was studying their social media, but specifically stalking Maddie online.
There's a big realization that we had been stalked for so many months and had no clue.
If anyone was his target, the symbol of what he wanted but couldn't get because he was too old, too awkward, too whatever, well, then it was her, Maddie. After all, Kaylee, she wasn't even supposed to be home. And that final social media post with all of them in it and the caption below it, one lucky girl, when he felt so unlucky, to be surrounded by these people every day when he wasn't, summarized everything at that moment that he was missing. Have you ever been on the outside kind of looking in? You sort of want something, but for whatever reason, you regard it as just not good enough. Have you ever been in that situation? You can sometimes feel very helpless, very even desperate. And sometimes those feelings may become anger and then even rage. And in the prime suspect's case, if he couldn't have what he wanted, if he couldn't get what he wanted, why should they? And what I think he fails to see is that social stuckness is partly his own fault. It's partly the challenge of a young person is to individuate, is develop their own agency. And probably mostly his own fault, but there is another part. society can be mean and merciless as well. And I think this is what this case has revealed to me. Not just the psychopathy of the crime, but what all crimes reflect, including and especially the Long Island serial killer that's unfolding as we speak. And that is, it's a symptom of what is going on in society. These crimes, these criminals, in a way, reflect us back to ourselves. I mean, especially this part.
Dylan and Bethany were getting blamed.
Completely slandered on the internet.
And if you are one of the people who is doing that, especially if you're a creator, shame on you. If you were one of the people participating in that, please put up your hand. Shame on you. You know, I think it's one thing to speculate and analyze a case prior to trial. It's another to make a complete mess of it. And this is where we circle back to that point that I made originally. What's interesting to me is this idea of the storytellers supposedly sensitively and carefully telling their story about this senseless psychopath. You know, he's the bad guy in the story. You know, a person apparently with zero feelings for his fellow man, and yet seemingly unable to see their own hypocrisy, because you see journalists and true crime creators exhibiting precisely the same trait as the quadruple murderer in this case: psychopathy, narcissism, sadism, having very little real humanity to their fellow man, even when they're expressly there campaigning for it. Anyway, I've said my piece. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Remember to watch the Titan Submersible documentary on Netflix. It's excellent, and look out for my next episode on that coming soon. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.